Peace and welcome to another episode of Soulview, man. And today I have a very, very special guest with me, man. I got Subtle Infinity in the building, y'all. Peace. What's up with you, bro?
Peace. Thank you for having me.
Man, it's my pleasure, man. Welcome to the Dragon's Lair, man. Like I was telling you, bro, I've been sub to your channel for some years now, man. And I caught some of your videos on Masterly Foolish channel too. And I was like, man, I gotta get that Subtle Infinity, dog. I said, man, you put down so much knowledge and so much information on your channel, bro, that I just definitely had to build with you, man. So I appreciate you connecting with me, man.
Right on, no problem. Thank you.
Oh man, it's all good. So you know that you've been doing this for a long time, man. You know what I'm saying? Like I told you earlier, how I kind of got into the awakening process with dealing with Zeitgeist, the movie. And I know you had some similar dealings with that as well. But how did you come about your journey, bro? How did you get into this? How did this all start for you?
Well, yeah, like I said, I I started with getting a random email from a friend of mine, and it was a link to the first Zeitgeist documentary. And at that time, this was in 2008, and at that time, I was 1 year into a 3-year contract with the Army, my second time in the Army because I had a break in service. And the information that was revealed to me in there is today it's just basic information. It's like people already know about it, but if you don't know about it, it was mostly about a lot of the Federal Reserve, a lot of the war, why war is profitable for the governments, a lot of 9/11 information, and then it goes into a lot of religious backgrounds as far as like where these religions are coming from and what stems off of them and how they're connected to different agencies, government agencies, and control measures over time. And this was about a 2.5, almost 3 hour documentary where it gave a rough outline of how a lot of the systems that we just see as normal in today's society are really one interconnected web of dominance and control over the masses on the soul, the mind, and the body level. And at that time, I had no family connections to any religion. I really wasn't at all ever connected to the government. I was never like a soldier that was all about America or anything. I was always me. I held on to my roots as loose as they were from not having really kind of any family knowledge of what's going on. But there's always a rooted connection from where I come from. I grew up in Oakland, California, so
Mm.
there's a strong connection with just your family, and we know a lot of things without knowing because we know how things work in society just because of how the government is pretty much uses Oakland and the Bay Area as a testing ground on people with having the Black Panthers and
Hmm.
having all this stuff, the drugs put into the community, the guns put in the community. So we know this stuff without knowing, and the same is how it is today. So I kind of had that background uh, without even knowing I had it at that time. So when Zeitgeist came into my vision, it was just like, all right, well, this is where all this stuff comes from. This is why those things are the way they are, and this is how your life is directly connected to that. So at that time, it was just kind of like everything was in a room, in a dark room already from having that in my background. And then when the documentary came in, it just switched on the light in that room, and now I could see how everything connected. And now I'm in this room full of shit, just like surrounded by
Mm.
all this. And I'm literally in the military at that time, protecting and like serving the epicenter of this. So there was this amount of rage and confusion and just emotion that was pumping through my body and every part of my every cell, everything in my beingness at that time. And here I am with 2 more years left in the army, And I was, yeah, I was stuck. I was like, man, what the fuck? I was getting ready to go. I called home. I was getting ready to go AWOL. I was like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like none
Right.
of it. I was really getting ready to go. And then my family, who doesn't really have any kind of, they didn't have much of a strong, like conscious knowledge of, the stuff that I was just really getting into at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just more for my, like, protecting myself. And, if I was to go AWOL, then, that's I'll be in like all kind of trouble and all that stuff. So they were just like, no, 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 just stay, whatever. So I slept on it, and I just used those next 2 years as kind of like a a learning experience. And I said, well, I'm new to this. I really don't know anything. I don't know. I'm just, aware. I'm just emotional at this time.
Mm.
Uh, I kind of just took a step back and said, I'm brand new to this. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to go. I know I have to do something, but I have to figure out what that is to do. So why don't I just use this time that I have left to gain my knowledge? So
Mm.
pretty much just spent those next 2 years left in the army. So that's 2009 and 10, just trying to figure out, doing more research, starting from Zeitgeist, doing more research, kind of shying away from Zeitgeist and moving into um, everything else. And right, right when I was done with that, and at that time, I was sharing a lot of information with my soldiers in the army at that time too. I played the
Mm.
Zeitgeist documentary I was on a boat in the army. I played that documentary in the galley of, excuse me, in the galley of my boat on in the army. So I was playing that shit early on with people, and they're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
People didn't even want to see that, and so at that
Yeah.
time, that's kind of when I started to, separate myself from groups of thought, to
Mm.
where, other people were just like, oh, we don't want to look at that. So that was my introduction to people being like, oh, well, we don't even want to look at that. And it was kind of shocking, but at the same time, I still had a responsibility in my head, because I was still about that army stuff, to where I was a staff sergeant. So you have like a
Mm.
non-commissioned officer's creed, to where your part of your job is to train your soldiers and protect your soldiers, and inform them about information. And I took that as information. Like I was
Right.
responsible not only for these soldiers, but I was responsible for their families, their children. They're they're uh, they're getting ready. They're forcing their children to take these vaccines, and that was a big thing. I almost got kicked out of the army in 2010 because of that.
Mm.
And this was all part of it. So I started going to researching what, vaccines and everything, and looking at how the military was using soldiers as guinea pigs at that time, and even before that. I mean, this goes all the way back. You can research it, but I was seeing this firsthand with the first time I was in the army in 2000, from 2000 2004. They had that anthrax shit jump off right
Right.
after 9/11, and we would get sent to like the on post gym in, like, by company or squad, to go get anthrax shots, like right out of the blue, and this
Mm.
shit just pumped out, and they would, shoot anthrax. I avoided it. Like, you could kind of avoid it if you know how to work the system a little bit,
Okay.
but most people can't do that. It's just like, you do what you're told.
Right.
So with anthrax, I knew something was really wrong with that, so I avoided that. And that was in 2004, three. So I knew at that time something was wrong, but I didn't, put two and two together. I didn't know why things were the way they were. But right after 9/11, we were getting pumped. I mean, we were getting shots after shot, vaccine
Mm.
after, they were calling vaccine. They had SARS, I think it was SARS, anthrax, and all kinds of other shit. And they they were pumping anything they could. And what I say is, they were just testing a lot of stuff, and seeing what happens. And we would have soldiers in those gyms that would just pass out. They would get, right in the gym, right, standing up. So I had that background. And then when I became a non-commissioned officer, a staff sergeant, in my second time, in Hawaii, I have these soldiers who are basically looking at me like I have to tell them, I'm required to tell them, get your kids vaccinated, and that never felt right to me.
Wow.
So I just wouldn't do it. I would actually tell them the truth. I'm like, here's the research. Here's the research I did. This causes, such and such and such and such in very young children. I would advise you to read this.
Mm.
And if I'm being completely honest with you, don't fucking do that. Don't get your wife and don't get your kids. But you're in the army, so you're like, we have to do this. So like
Right.
I would get like the whatever shots they had. But when it came to the H1N1 vaccine, that's when I put my foot down and I told everybody, don't fucking do it.
Mm.
And at that time I was getting out of the army. I was 1 year, that was my last year. And in your last year, you're basically out processing. So
Okay.
I I was all about just like make sure your soldiers are taken care of. And on a personal note, I'm in this body for the rest of my life. The army only owns my body for the next year. So fuck that. They're not putting anything in my body. I'm going to fight this. And that whole year was basically me just going up the chain of command and being barked at by everybody from my first sergeant in my company all the way up to the sergeant major and lieutenant colonels uh, of my brigade and battalions. And they were just kind of just like, you need to do this. You're still a soldier. You didn't. I'm like, dude, say whatever you want, but I have the research right here. And I have a responsibility to myself and my soldiers, and I'm protecting myself and my soldiers. And basically, when I said that, because I used their own words against them,
Mm-hmm.
because we had to, I still know 90 something percent of the NCO creed right now, which talks about, maintaining the health and the welfare of your soldiers.
Mm.
So when they get that and they know I've always been a squared away soldier, I've always been about my shit. And I
Right.
was also the training officer at my unit before I was getting out, which means I was responsible for maintaining all the documents and the health, the literal health, like how they work out and what they do, and scheduling all these things. So I had that on my side too, and basically they just barked at me forever, and then threatened me with re, um, taking my rank away and all this other shit. And I said, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. I'm getting out of the army. I'm telling my soldiers not to do this. I'm telling them not to have their kids do this and their wives and husbands not to do this. So do what you got to do, but I'm gonna do what I got to do. And
Right.
they just avoided. They just let me go, and I stayed. My name stayed in the red all the way out. I was basically the last soldier in the army in Hawaii to not get that H1N1. Of course, there were like
Wow.
officers in yeah, there are officers. Like I said, if you know how to work the system, and if you have a higher rank, you can work the system even more. So
Hmm.
there's officers, they just get their names, signed off, and then they just won't get it. So there's other
Right.
people who avoided it, because I know personally a lot of people who just avoided it and they just got like their name signed on it just to not be on the list. But my name was read on that list until I got out, and I would get calls. It was funny. I actually got a call from one of my old soldiers from my first time I was in. She was now an officer, and she was now outranking me, and she worked in the office where my name was coming up all the time, and she called me in my office. She's like, "What, Sergeant Rice, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Who the hell is this?"
Right.
Like, "Oh, yeah, 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 no." Like, "Oh, hell no, I'm not going on there and getting that." No. And
Right.
she's like, "Oh, I know exactly what you were saying." So
Right.
they know. There's soldiers, there's people who know, and with
Mm.
the amount of information that's available out there, they can't avoid this stuff. So I
Right.
can imagine what people were, especially as soldiers, are going through right now.
Right.
But that's what kind of made all of these like undercover attacks on the masses of people personal for me, on top of just my like leadership background and my direct connection to, you know, caring for people and, on a personal level in the army and just as a person. So all of this, like all the 9/11 stuff, like I took that shit personally. Like
Mm.
this stuff was, I was there. I was actually 3 hour drive. I was in Virginia when 9/11 jumped off. So I was right down the road. I was really young. I was like 18, some 19. At that time, I was like cutting grass. Yeah, you on grass cutting detail when you ain't shit in the army. And
Mm. Okay.
they came on the radio, and I remember everybody running around, you know, going back to the company and then watching it on TV. And then
Yeah, that was crazy.
yeah, it was a trip, and it kind of it really got to me. So when all of that stuff became like a conscious reality of an intelligence behind it to mess with people, then I took it on as a responsibility to let people know, like, hey, there's more to the story than this. And my YouTube channel is basically just an extension of that.
Mm, that's powerful, bro. That's powerful. So let me ask you this, because that's one transition that I would like to talk about. The transitioning from the military back into being a civilian. What was that like for you? Going to start your YouTube page? Because there was a process before that, right? Before you started the
Yeah,
page?
yeah, oh, definitely.
Okay.
So
How
the
was that?
first time I, yeah, so the first time I got out of the army in 2004, I was still kind of young and dumb and just like, oh, I need a college degree and I need to do this. So I had no idea what was going on. So I got my job, I went to college, and then uh, never had any fulfillment out of that. I knew there was more work that needed to be done. Like yeah, everything. I had everything I thought I wanted, and then I ended up going back in the army to get something more, and then
Mm,
everything I just said jumped off. And then when I got out the second time in 2010, I did the same thing. I went into school, and it was even more so. I was an English major. I was like, oh, I need to write. I need to, because I've always been a writer.
okay.
And I started going to the Cal State system out here, and it's like, all right, well, you know, what's going on? And that's when I learned that there, I got into it with my teachers. Like there was a teacher that was in some elective class that was um, teaching, you know, these young students like how to think basically.
Hmm.
And there was this one teacher in this class. It was like some kind of like, I don't know what kind of class it was, but this lady was basically pushing off these old tendencies. This teacher was pushing off these old sort of like, you know, you ladies need to just, you know, get married and do this. And like, I was like, what the fuck? Like, who are you? Like, how are you telling these young ass kids these 1950s ass mentalities? Like, what's going on? And I actually got kicked out of that class by the teacher, and the students were clapping for me because I went off on her. I was like, "How the fuck you can't tell these students that like, they're gonna look at you like a mother figure, and they're gonna think
Mm,
like this." And that's another thing. A lot of these kids are gonna develop, you know, psychological issues because they have these things that are going on. They have to think, and they have all these expectations on themselves, and
right.
so I just took on that. That was fresh out of the army. So I saw these young 17, 18, 19-year-old kids as like my soldiers. I'm hella old at that time. I'm like, how old was I? Like 24, something like that.
Okay.
In the army or getting out of the army, 25, getting out of the army for the second time. I was like, man, fuck this. Like, you can't do that. And she was like, no, I can. And you get the hell out of my class. I was like, all right, well, fuck it. So I got out. That was the first time I was kicked out of class, and then um, I was like, well, I started to feel a separation from college, and started to feel a separation from even getting a an English degree, because I was like, what is an English degree? Like, I
Mm,
really just want to learn how to write. You know, I want to learn how to this. And I was in my English class. I had 2 more years of this one teacher at this school system. And one of the papers that she was telling us to do, or project she was telling us to do, was like interpret this art piece and then write something about it. And then all these all these students came back and gave their interpretations. And this damn teacher was basically saying, no, that's not how it is. Like, and so she was
Mm.
telling students how to interpret art and tell me, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, this is nothing different than the military.
Mm.
So that's when I started to pull away even more. I was like, I'm not sitting here for 2 more years of this fucking lady. Like, I'm out of here. Like, so it was more to that story than that, but that was the rough overview of what happened there. So I let that go, and right when I was getting out of college, the Occupy movement jumped off,
I remember
and
that.
yeah, and that was in like 2011, and yeah, that really hit me hard because when it jumped off here, it wasn't really that big. It was only like maybe it was like less than 100 people in Occupy San Francisco. Occupy Oakland wasn't even a thing. It was just in San Francisco, and nobody knew about it.
Mm.
And I was actually the first. I was making my own flyers and T-shirts and shit for us to go to the Federal Reserve because that's where I knew that was the epicenter.
Mm-hmm.
I got off the BART with my little speaker and my little flyers, my shirt and my anonymous mask, and fucking I was by myself, and nobody was at the Federal Reserve. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then I looked at the other flyers, and then everybody else had flyers to go to the Bank of America building.
Mm.
So I walked up the street to the Bank of America building, and that's where the organizers, the quote unquote organizers of the Occupy movement were centered. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, the Federal Reserve of San Francisco is right down the street, like in my head. But at
Mm-hmm.
that time, I was just happy to be surrounded by people who, think similarly.
Mm-hmm.
So I jumped into that and I was talking to a lot of people just about like, what they think, and then, grab the megaphone and start yelling in the streets and, talking to people. I had a little write up, started reading that write up of like, this is the shit that's fucked up and all that other stuff. And, it's just basically yelling, and like you're yelling just to let people know shit's fucked up,
Right.
and you're yelling from your own perspective. So I was like, all right, this is cool. And then eventually that grew, and then they moved down to the Federal Reserve later on, and that's when they started camping in front of the Federal Reserve like a week and a half, 2 weeks later. And then that's when it really started to take off because now you're on federal property, not corporate property, because it was taken out of the corporate Bank of America shit and then moved into the federal sidewalks. So that's when they had to start putting up barriers in front of the Federal Reserve and all this other stuff. And the story got bigger basically. So as the story was getting bigger, like people were getting bigger. People are starting to know what's going on a deeper level, and people are communicating. And then you had native people coming down, indigenous people talking about, making the story even more complex. So within that networking side, and then at the same time, like I said, you're going to have people who just want to do it just because it's a thing. Like they only want to go so far. And then other people only want to do it just because it's like cool and hip. And when you really look at it, it's really just adding to the numbers. So overall, it's all one big storyline, but you have these little factions inside, not to mention the people who are put in there to control that shit, which was another thing that we were seeing, like government agents that were going down there trying to manipulate the conversations in their little talking circles. And then also people went in like protests when Occupy Oakland jumped off in October. That's when it got real big. Um, and I'm from Oakland, so I was like, all right, y'all San Francisco people are cool over here. I'm just gonna go back to Oakland and help them over there. So I went straight over to Occupy Oakland on day one, And on day one, that's when it really popped off. We were on the city hall lawn, with hella people just around there, and that's when the one of the first speakers that were there were the native Ohlone people, and the Ohlone are the indigenous people of the Bay Area, like all up and down the Bay Area. So all the shell mounds that have been destroyed, which are the burial grounds, which have been cut down and destroyed, um, those are the people who represent this land. And they had the mic in the beginning, and one of the main speakers, her name's Karina. She still advocates for a lot of the shit that's going on around here. Um, she said plainly, "How the fuck are y'all gonna occupy occupied land?" And that's when it kind of hit me to where like, oh shit, like where are you really coming from? Like, what are you really talking about? It kind of went over a lot of other people's heads, but that was the truth. Like, you call yourself occupy this and occupy that. Y'all are really just talking some shit. That's just a game. It's for fun. Like you're just creating this political thing to, you know, only go so far. When the truth is, these assholes are occupying occupied land. It's already occupied. It's been the indigenous people's land. When are we ever going to have that conversation? And if we're not going to have that conversation right now, we're no different than the people who are just silencing and talking over the indigenous people, that, you know, the people who are running the Federal Reserve and all that other stuff. You're doing the same thing. So that made it personal to me on a deeper level, because my family is native to California, Mexico, and like Louisiana, like the indigenous people around, you know, of this earth. Like this part of the earth is like my blood. So, and even at that.
All right, so here we go, man. I don't know what happened, man, but we got cut off. So we can go ahead and continue and roll like we were rolling. But you were going into, you know, the transition from the military to being a civilian until actually doing your YouTube page. So go ahead and continue, bro.
Okay, so yeah, I think I left off at Occupy Oakland day one. That was a day when the the deeper storyline, that was probably day one of the transition from psychological warfare to spiritual warfare, realizing that there was a spiritual warfare that was going on.
Mm,
And how I explained it before was there was an understanding of a physical warfare with the being in the army. Like this is what war is. Like it was a thing that's obvious. Most people are understanding physical
right.
warfare, but we don't understand that there's actually a psychological warfare that is beyond that, that, you know, that the physical warfare sits inside of. And then even
Mm,
beyond the psychological warfare, there's a spiritual warfare that the psychological and the spirit and the physical warfare fits inside of. So at that time, on day one of Occupy Oakland, I was still in my, you know, yell at the world, yell, you know, ask the government, you know, to change, not even
right.
realizing that they have no interest in changing. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to be doing, the system is running exactly the way it's supposed to be running. So
Mm,
uh, after having occupied San Francisco under my belt and now seeing the same kind of things jump off in Occupy Oakland, I was already starting to feel myself kind of pull away, and to hear the native peoples of the Ohlone land that have already been protesting for years before any of this Occupy stuff jumped off. Like to hear them say, "How the hell are you going to occupy occupied land?" It hit
right.
me, and like my brother and my cousins were out there. It hit us real close, like to home. Um, and I was just like, all right, well, let me just stay here until I figure out somewhere else to go and something else to do. And you know, keep it, keep it with the family, because the Oakland family is pretty much the only family that I know. And this is
Mm,
like the most powerful shit I had ever been a part of, even beyond, especially beyond the military. Because, like I said, I think when I was cut off, Occupy Oakland was basically day one of the Occupy movement, because we had, and there's a lot of things that start off in Oakland with the Black Panthers and everything, and like this is always going to be a threat in to the mindset of, you know, the normal thinkers, the NPC, kind of the non-player character consciousness that just goes into doing whatever the status quo says. We've never been, we've always
Mm-hmm.
danced outside of those lines here. Literally, the Black
Mm-hmm.
Panthers were responsible for so much around not only the country, but around the world. There's people in South America that jumped off with their own kind of, you know, fight the power movements. Uh, and yeah, I think even New Zealand, and just as having the blueprint of the Black Panther Party as something to, you know, be their foundation. So when Occupy Oakland jumped off, we were already on the radar of the establishment. And just, you know, as we do, we had it set up right. We had on the city hall lawn, we had our own community. People set up their tents. We had a daycare. We had a power center. We had a library. We had a kitchen, a fully functional kitchen. We had free energy. We had people donating food. We had a self-contained environment that was being provided for by the community. And that's a big
Mm-hmm.
no-no. That's like a big, like, hey, you know, it's a threat to the system, and we're doing it like basically a slap in the face to the standing government, as in, we can do this shit on our own. Like, we can take care of ourselves. You've been telling us
Right.
forever that we can't do this. Here we are doing it, and we're successful. We're feeding the homeless. We're taking care of the homeless people around that area were being fed, you know, and you know that we had the old schools coming in. They had a sense of life now. They were talking to, you know, the old schools. A lot of them are homeless, and they were coming to talk to the younger ones, because a lot of the younger people who are set up there were the ones protesting. So that was also a huge, you know, bringing together of thought of minds. And
Right.
when all that, you know, is coming together, that is an extreme problem, because now you're not so much focused on, the energy is not focused on fighting the power. The energy is focused on being the power. We were
Mm.
an example of our own strength. We can do this ourselves without you. Fuck you. We'll do it on your city hall lawn. That's not yours. This is our land. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
outside of, you know, the indigenous, you know, storyline at that time, even that is just a threat. So
Right.
it was just like, all right, well, this can't happen. And just like the government always does, they have to develop some kind of problem that they can fix. So their problem was, you know, these people are dirty. There's rats in their little community on the city hall lawn. They're attracting vermin with all this, and we have to remove them. That's what their city ordinance was, to criminalize us, when the actual fact was there were hella rats and garbage and trash on the city hall lawn before we got there. And in fact, our presence scared that off. We were actually
Right.
cleaning it, because the rats and all that stuff, they don't want to be around a lot of people. They want to be by themselves. So our presence actually scared all that stuff off, and we were cleaning it up. So you know, they just make up all these stories, but that's what happened. That's what it initialized their attack on us. So there's a psychological warfare. They had to put it out on their mainstream media, which was also what they were doing with the news vans. Because, like I said, we even had security teams that would be
Mm.
on bikes, that would go out and you know, do like a little surveillance on whether the cops were going to come around, or the media teams. And I was part of the security team, to where we actually caught these news vans putting their own interviewees out there on the street to go into our groups, and then they would be interviewed later on. We caught them
Mm.
coming out of their van, and there were some people out there, like I said, this is Oakland. So when that happens and the security team comes back and says, what the fuck are you doing? Where are
Right.
you coming from? What are you trying to do? You're attacking. That's a threat. That's an attack. So we had some just, some regular ass Oakland ass people who were out there getting ready to fuck this dude up. And that's when shit got real real. They're
Right.
like, "Oh, damn." And so we were like, "No, no, no, we can't have that. We're not going to, fuck this dude up. He knows he's wrong. We saw him come out of the van. He knows he came out of that van. He's paid to do these little funky ass interviews. We've been knowing this has happened. We just caught him. So, let him go. Hey, beating his ass ain't gonna do nothing but make the cops, want to come in and shut everything down."
Right.
So that's when we started to see that this is getting real real. They're starting to really attack us on every front. So even during our marches, because we shut down the port of Oakland for, I think it was like 3 days. It ended up being, they were set back like 3 days, but for a whole day, the whole port was shut down. We had something like
Dang.
30,000 people that went down there and shut the whole port, and that's millions and millions of dollars that are
Mm.
going through one of the biggest ports in the country. Um, so we were a big force to be reckoned with, and you had like big names out there. Like I think his name's like Boots Riley. I think one of the guys who's like, he's a director um, and artist, musician, and people out there speaking. Names are Danny Glover was out there speaking one day. Cornell West came out there one morning and walked by just to see how things were going on. So
Mm.
um, it was a thing that was happening, and
Right.
they were really scared about this was happening on getting bigger, because we weren't asking for anything, and we were a very powerful unit, and only getting more stronger. So once they developed their health ordinance scare tactic with the mainstream media, that's when they decided to shut us down, and they called in officers from around, all the way from like we saw people from Santa Cruz. They called people from Santa Cruz all the way up to Sacramento, and we caught like people from infiltrating these protests to where they were plain clothes uh, officers that were walking around with guns. And they had their fucking
Mm.
guns walking around in there, because this was later on one of the Black Lives Matter protest marches. We caught and cornered one of these cops, and he pulled his gun out on us.
Wow.
And this is a trick. Yeah. So, but in that was later on, but in the actual occupied time, there's videos online right now where you see pictures of officers caught in plain clothes that were in there to instigate. And that's also what they do. This is what I tell people all the time about like protesting. They're just going to get in there and just fuck it all up. So
Mm.
when they were getting ready to shut us down, uh, they had that standoff. They corner it, they close off, they kick everybody out of the camping area, close it off with their goons, and then they label you as like criminals for being, against the orders or whatever. And then they have their instigators dressed in like black or plain clothes. All they have to do is throw a water bottle across the police lines, and now they have a reason to, hit you. So
Hmm.
that's what they did. They had these instigators, and we would shut these instigators down and get them out of there. But by that time, they already had the excuses they needed to shut us down or to kick us out of there. So that's what they did. They
Right.
hit us with flashbang grenades, tear gas canisters, rubber bullets,
Dang.
and they actually hit a veteran in the head with a flashbang grenade. That was a whole lawsuit that went in. His name was Scott Olson.
Mm.
He was a Marine veteran. He's got brain damage now. Got hella fucked up.
Damn.
Um, but yeah, they hit us with tear gas and flashbang grenades um, 4 times, because we circled around the block. We gathered after we got hit hard the first time, we got together. We're like, man, fuck this. We ain't going anywhere. So we were all pumped up, you know. We ain't got nothing else to do anyway. So we went back there and started yelling again, and we did that 4 times. And this is all on the news, and people were taking video and pictures of, like, they had that big ass, like, military looking truck with a big satellite dish on it that was like what people were talking about. It can send like energy that makes your skin like boil, like it makes you like I don't know, it's just like a microwave attack vest vehicle or something like that. They had one of
Mm,
those out there. They had all kinds of shit. And
damn.
yeah, that was actually the day when Occupy around the world jumped off, because that next morning when I was on Facebook, I was seeing pictures of Occupy Oakland in on the Occupy Egypt or Occupy Cairo Facebook page, to where people were out there marching, saying that, and this was before this stuff in Cairo jumped off, because there was a protest
Right.
out there, and they were saying, there was with their signs saying Occupy Cairo or Occupy Egypt stands in solidarity with Occupy Oakland. And that's some powerful ass shit. That shit gives me goosebumps even now, and breaks me down, because I was just like, man, this is huge. This is big, because we really are talking about the same shit. This is one
Right.
power system and one control grid. So that's when it got really real for me, and extra real, like it just jumped another level. And that's when the Occupy movement really just popped off on different in different areas around the world, South America, you know, and all over the country, all over the United States. But
Right.
it really kind of took off, and here in Oakland, it just kind of branched off into little spots here and there. Never really recovered after that day, because that was after we shut down the port of Oakland. Because once you fuck with their money, that's when you start fucking with, that's a problem for them. So
Right.
you can't do that again. They shut down the port, you shut it down again, they're losing millions upon millions, tens of millions of dollars coming up soon. So that's really why they shut it down. And
Mm,
at that time, like I said, you have a gathering of minds. So you have a lot of old schools. You have people in the Bay Area, specifically Oakland, from all around the world. This is a heavy meeting area for people everywhere. And we had, I remember one night there was this Hare Krishna guy who came out there, and he was I remember he walked up real slick on us. The old school brother just came up and said, um, what are you really yelling about? Like, what do you really like? Do you know what kind of warfare you're in? Do you know what you're really talking about? Are you aware of the spiritual warfare? He didn't push anything on us. He just, asked us questions just to see where we were at.
hmm.
And nobody had any answers for that. Some people wrote him off. But, I sat there and listened. I was like, I know I'm aware that there's a spiritual warfare, but I don't know anything more than that. And no, I don't want to yell for the rest of my life. And yes, I would like to figure out, why things are the way they are. So that's when I started to look more inside of myself about, like, what's going on here, and
Mm,
ask myself, go more in, take the more inner perspective of what's going on, and kind of shy away from, the movements that are out there, and do more inner movement. So more less outer movements with, yelling, and, having these expectations for the government, and, moving a lot of stuff from the inside. And that's when I was
mm,
saying that I was making the transition from the psychological warfare into the spiritual warfare. So
mm,
in order to figure that out, I had to really kind of stop the things that were obvious to me, that were kind of taking a lot of my energy. And that was like a lot of the yelling, and the um, just the extra stuff in the government, and just the clearing out of all this density that was part of my body. And at that time, all the bodies, excuse me, and at that time on YouTube, that's when the New Age channels started to take off. That's when a lot of these spirit science channels and
Mm-hmm.
um, what is it? Like I started to listen to like channelers and different kind of
Okay.
new age gurus and stuff like that. And then all that shit made sense to me. I was like, man, this feels really good. Like, yeah, I do feel like an, infinite being and all this other shit, that's out there. And
Right.
everything that they tell you you're supposed to feel like and flowery this and flowery that and mixed in, sprinkle in some aliens, extraterrestrials, Sasquatch, inner Earth,
Right.
and flat Earth wasn't there at that time. It was just inner Earth stuff because it was just like, Sasquatch is coming from there, and there's aliens, and then you had the reptilians, so the David Icke stuff was there too, and so at
Mm-hmm.
that time, so
Yep.
that's like the transition from from the physical to the non-physical, and so yeah, it was a whole bunch of different teachers and people, information channels from here and there, but ultimately, I kind of just boil it down to like the new age. That's basically what it was. I
Mm.
moved from protesting into um, realizing a lot of this new age information. I just use that as an example because it's a lot more than that.
Right.
People say conscious this and conscious that today, but personally, I kind of lump it all together because it's just a bunch of words when you really boil it all down. But
Hmm.
the new age was really big online, and it was easy. It's accessible. It's free, and it was a community, and it was a way that I was always a writer, so I started to write about these things and develop some kind of awareness and a knowingness of something more beyond just the government, the shit that was there. And
Right.
so I was doing a lot of the writings on Facebook, and Facebook was, doing their shit like YouTube is doing now, to where they wouldn't even show my posts to the people that are on my friends list. So people are like,
Hmm.
we don't see this, we don't see that, and that's when I was kind of discouraged from that. And Facebook got off Facebook eventually in 2014, and that's when I started to transition more into YouTube, because I was like, well, if I say it with my voice and I make a video, then they can't stop that. Like they can't,
Right.
the interpretation can't be messed with if I'm saying it and then I make it entertaining and I'm using my own voice, uh, and then eventually challenge myself to do kind of freestyle, like kind of like now, just kind of speak on whatever topics based upon my own experience or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I could do that, so that's when I let everything go I was doing on Facebook and then made the transition over to YouTube. And when I made that transition, I had just kind of like left I was transitioning out of the new age kind of mentality, and I was letting that go because I started to see the downfalls of the new age community. And I had already went through all, like, a lot of the knowledge of like the sacred geometry, and cleared out a lot
Mm.
of the densities that was there that I didn't even know was there, and then started to see personally how even the new age communities and what we think is like forward thinking circles and all that stuff were actually just another manipulative group, that is
Hmm.
doing nothing different than these movements that are out there to limit your your overall movement personally and collectively. So
Hmm.
I was like, well, let me just explain this in however way I can. I'm new to this. I know some other people will be new to this. So why don't I just, pretty much just make a fool of myself and just, talk for 1,000 damn videos, and somebody, something will be right, something will make sense. Somebody will get something. As long as
For
one
sure.
person gets something out of it, then that's good enough for me. I mean, at least I'm doing
Yes.
something. So that's yeah,
Exactly.
that's pretty much how I made the transition from the military uh, into the YouTube channel now, and then kind of even transitioning away from YouTube now to whatever is next. But yeah, that's
Right.
basically how that went down.
Indeed. That's powerful, bro. That's powerful. So what has been challenging on that journey, just from all these different things that you've been going through, these different transitions, dealing with the Occupy Oakland and, going to YouTube and dealing with your family, like you said, what has all been challenging while you're trying to increase your awareness?
So it's been challenging based upon, who I am and what I'm about on different levels. So in the occupied time, it was challenging dealing with, people who just shut you down on the streets because they want to put their agenda out there. And then you're like, wait, we're talking about deeper level, we're talking about this. So I mean that happens on other circles too, but that's one thing at that
Mm-hmm.
time, which really doesn't bother me now because you're all it's a knowingness of knowing that people are gonna think whatever they're gonna think, and they don't need to be thinking like you.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard enough to think on your own, let alone somebody else think on the same page as you. So
Right.
it's just a matter of letting go. But as far as like challenges that have been there, um, just like the regular stuff, like people who are on this journey, having expectations of your family and friends and all that other stuff, listening to you and sometimes being against you in so many different consciously and subconsciously. Um,
Mm.
they're there. Um, and, it's hard seeing family members fight themselves basically, and be their own worst enemy to where
Mm.
they're not really. And that's the thing. That's another part of the expectation thing. That's their way they're processing. I mean, I was fighting myself so many different ways, not that long ago. So
Hmm.
it's really our problem when we're, putting those expectations on somebody else,
Right.
but they're really just on their journey. So that's another thing to let go. But that was, a challenge at one time.
Have you
Um,
had to separate yourself from your family because of that?
um, in in so many ways, yes. But and it depends on certain family members too, like when you have, or even with friends or just regular people, if people are they're gonna want to separate themselves from you, so
Mm.
they're if that happens, then you just say, all right, we'll see you later, have a good
Right.
day. But for me personally, I usually just kind of adjusted myself to where I turn the volume down, and
Mm.
if I turn it all the way down to not, and this is the thing, it goes into my vow of silence. I muted myself. you know,
Mm.
I took 1 year vow of silence to where to see to push myself to a whole nother level, but also to yeah, it's part of that storyline of turning the volume down and just allowing the world to be what it is.
Mm.
So
That's
if
powerful.
once you turn it, like in the protesting, like I said, you're just yelling and yelling and yelling. You have your volume all the way up and you think that's the way it's supposed to be. This is how I'm going to get people to hear me, right? Turn my volume up and yell.
Right.
That's what the system actually wants you to do, because you can only yell so loud.
Mm.
And when you focus so much on volume, you can really only say so much in that voice.
Mm.
And there's more that can be said without yelling, without saying anything. And there's more work and transitions and things that can be done on every kind of level without focusing on that as your weapon. So your voice is your weapon on every level. I started to realize that with my YouTube channel, and
Mm-hmm.
even down to the vibration of your voice. I started to realize that even more once I started speaking again. We don't feel this, but I felt it after I started speaking, after being silent for a whole year, that your voice vibrates your entire bone structure. Like you can feel
Mm.
your voice in your toes. this is the thing. We don't like kind of like how you don't hear your heartbeat, or you don't like you can't feel certain things.
Mm-hmm.
These vibrations exist on every part of us, and when you're transferring that energy in through voice to somebody else, like that shifts something
Mm.
on levels that we are not even aware of. So I wanted to, put my weapon, my strongest weapon, away for an entire year, and do another kind of reset of myself. And that's another kind of another shift to where some people are not going to want to be around you when you're
Mm.
they're going to see you how they need to see you in order to see themselves how they need to see them. Like
Mm.
they have to put you in a certain box in order to make themselves feel a certain way. And if you challenge the way they see themselves, they'll either discard you or they will label you as something that makes them feel a certain way.
Wow.
So this is how the mind works, and a lot of this, goes into the narcissism, the tendencies that are triggered and amplified throughout society. It's really just another form of mind control that's out there,
Mm.
and the mind control that we have on ourselves. That was another part of why I went silent, was to release a lot of the conditioning that I wasn't even aware of, because I was,
Wow.
reacting and responding
Right.
to without, unconsciously. And like I told people when they ask me about it, is that we don't realize a lot of the times that when you're saying something, you don't just say it. Like you have to first have like a catalog of things to respond. That's who you are, like your character. And then you have to decide to say that. And then you have to decide how you're going to say that to the person you're saying what you're saying. And each one of those, and then you actually have to say it. And each one of those is a different mechanism. It's like a different
Right.
brain. It's a different
Mm.
part of you. So we don't see all of these cogs that are going, turning in our reality until you turn it off. So I realized that when
Right.
I turned it off for a whole year, I was like, wait a second, hold on. And what that's just a flowery way of explaining the steps to your inner voice, which is your original voice. So this is just making yourself one step closer to, like, what people say, your your third eye, or it's kind of like your third voice, or your singular voice. It's not your third
Mm.
eye, it's your first eye, and it's not your third voice, it's your first voice.
Mm.
So because the actual voice that we have is just the shit that comes out after we have calculated all these other things
Right.
and then said it. So I was like, you know what, I'm done with that, at least for a year. Let me turn this off and let that go, because we're all been raised by people who had their own problems, and
Right.
like
Factual.
their problems transitioned over to us. They're still dealing with their problems, and they have to amplify the problems that you have in your next and then they have to amplify the problems that the next generations have in order to validate their own power, their own sense of self. So these
Right.
are the things. This is what's happening on a mass scale, on a generational level. You have these narcissistic generations, to where you have these people thinking a certain way because they just have been conditioned that that is the pinnacle of thinking and the pinnacle of thought. And they don't want to change that because they don't want to lose power. They don't want to lose control. So we do that with
Mm.
ourselves individually. We don't want to let go of things because we don't want to lose power. We don't lose control. And our voice is a big part of that. So I had to reset my voice. And one of those ways was to turn the audio all the way off, and then allow my inner voice to come back to what I would like to be, like, slow it down. So that was another challenge, and but that was, like I said, turning the volume down. There was a
Right.
part of that to where I needed to turn it down that was a challenge to turn it down, not only for myself, but for the sake of my family, for the sake of my extended family, for the sake of my work,
Mm,
so on and so forth. And
that's
yeah,
powerful.
that was an extension of, why, because we're silenced on a daily basis. And like on a public level, my vow of silence was to stand in solidarity with the indigenous nations of the world who had been silenced for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Hmm.
That's a big part of the problems that we're dealing with now is people are so caught up in their second, third, and fourth voices that they're really not allowing themselves to hear their inner voice, and we're not really listening to the things that will make some real moves and changes in the world because we haven't done that on a personal level.
Mm,
So that's when I kind of like pulled back from everything and just let it all just be out there how it is. And um, that the challenges that extend off that are like they're all the same. They're just extensions of the personal work that we haven't done. So
mm. That's powerful, man.
yeah,
That's really powerful, bro. And to see you do that, you know what I'm saying? Like, cause like I said, I was sub to your channel, so I actually seen it. I'm like, dude, you know what I'm saying? Like, that takes a level of discipline, but also a level, like you said, of understanding. And you were doing the self work and the soul work, man. You know what I'm saying? So, big ups to you for that, man, because that's dope.
thank
You
you.
know what I'm saying? Now you have a whole new perspective on things. So that's awesome, bro. So let me ask you this, Subtle. What keeps you motivated, bro? What's so rewarding about this journey and this knowledge that you obtained?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have the motivation I used to have, at least on the forefront, after my silence, because that really changed everything.
Mm,
The work that I was doing and the, just what I was learning about communication overall, language overall, even the language that we use, the words that we use are extensions a lot of the times of our own enslavement. They're just how we see ourselves, externalizing things that we say like movement and shifting and all this other stuff that is shifting from what, and like and doing why, like asking a deeper layer of why removes a lot of the attachments to the things that used to be a big part of who I thought I was, before. So
mm,
now a lot of who I thought I was before now isn't there anymore. So
mm,
the motivation that came along with those people that I was and that person that I was at that time with the work that I was doing, I don't have that as much now. That doesn't mean that I don't have the capacity or the yeah, I don't. It doesn't mean I don't have the capacity or the drive to do it. It's just that it's just like I wouldn't catalog it as like a motivation. I would say there's like there's this never ending fire that's still there, and it used to be like a big inferno. Now it's just a candle. And it's
mm,
just something that, and it's always been a candle. The experience was to turn it into an inferno because that's cool, or it's we just have to have an
mm.
experience, we have to do something, and you
Right.
have to burn a lot of that shit out of your inner self in order to get back to that the clearness, the clarity of your singular candle. So
Mm,
to explain like the motivation part, that's is basically one side of it, and the other side is that coming back to where I am now, there's a, and I still have difficulty with this too because I don't see myself as having a responsibility to do anything other than like on the what I call now, and this is coming from somebody he doesn't refer, or he's passed on now, but never really referred to himself as a teacher, but Yuji Krishnamurti, as far as like
mm.
the the idea of this holy business that's out there. There's this the holy business of the self. Like what? Why should I have to do anything on a massive scale like that? Like why should I have the motivation to? Who am I? Like who am I to be, saying or doing anything on that kind of level? And really,
Mm,
I'm no different than anybody else. But from my perspective, like I said, that fire is there. That there's for a reason. And um, when there are injustices going on in the world on every kind of scale, there are people who turn, like, look the other way, and then there are people who say something about it. And I've always been somebody who says something about it, and I don't think that's ever going to change. As long as
mm,
there are people doing fucked up shit out there, there should be somebody who says something about it, because there there's there's too much going on. There's too much going on right now to where we could say something, just even saying something about it. If we change our perspectives and acknowledging that this stuff exists,
mm-hmm.
um, that can change some things. And that's really just that's kind of like the epicenter of my motivation, is to adjust the perspective of the inner perspective, which will adjust the outer perspective, and really not have any kind of, like, have as little amount of attachments and extra words attached to that as possible. Like, make it as simple
Mm,
as possible. Our experience is not really as complex as everybody has made it out to be.
mm.
There's we I mean, we eat, we shit, we drink, we communicate, we make babies, and we die. I mean,
Right.
on a physical level. And that's another thing. Like, I'm even moving more towards uh, polishing my perspective on there being no separation between the physical and the spiritual. even
Mm,
the Even the interpretation of the word spiritual, what is this, why do we have to have all these different interpretations of what's going on? The spirit, the soul, that's
right.
actually causing a lot of the problems that's going on here. And then you make it even more complex, and turn the separation into, like, flags, different nations. I mean, not to say that there aren't different nations, but just to make it nations of people, but just to make it more clear about how complex things can get, to where it makes problems for the whole world.
Right.
And
S-
the same
So
thing
let
happens
me
in the
ask you this.
religion.
Let me ask you this, Subtle, because you're saying some powerful information, man, and I can see the transformation and the breakthrough basically that you're going through. So at this point in time, because you had the year of silence, you come back refreshed, you start to see things from a different perspective. Does that now change your mission?
Well, that's the thing. Like, my mission, I don't see myself as having, like, a mission like I did before. Like, my mission was caught
Okay.
up in, like, oh yeah, we got to do this. Like, I don't have the same attachments as I do before. I'm in a space to where I'm even more so going kind of like day by day, because we can only move as fast as, if you want to work on that mission work, you're only going to move as fast as everybody else, as the overall
Mm,
everybody else. There's no separation between, I'm no different than anybody else. So we're talking about, like,
okay.
a macro scale movement, where that's really kind of looking honestly. That's mostly what I've been focusing on, is taking an honest perspective on how the world is, and what the world, what what what, like, where they're shifting, and what levels of movement are shifting here and there. So you can see how millions and millions of people are still caught up in politics, right?
Right.
There's the magic that's out there working right now on a massive scale. One of the big ones is politics. People giving their power away to, so codependency, basically. So that's one of the biggest problems that's out there. And in order for that to shift, people have to realize that that is a problem and then eventually let that go. And that's going to take some time. Look how long it takes for an
Mm.
individual to do that. So,
Right.
multiply that times millions of people. We're looking at, time that needs to change. And the only way it's going to change healthy on a healthy scale is if it changes like on its own individually.
Mm.
So there's no magic wand out there. There's no alien, extraterrestrials that are going to come down and do all this and make everybody change. If that were to happen, if there were some like alien thing, just to step into that fake ass world for a moment, if that were to happen, you're still going to have these extremely sick and diseased as people making decisions
Mhm.
on how the world should be on a massive scale from that perspective, from a very sick
Mm.
and diseased perspective. So, and I from my experience, I don't want that to happen. I would like them to, if I was going to recommend something, clear that shit out the right way. On take your time, do what you got to do. Like, I have no expectations on that, but let it happen. And that's the same thing. Like, who am I to say what should be happening and all that other stuff? But just for example purposes, like, that there's a lot of shifting that needs to happen on that scale. So knowing that, that's a big relief to let that go. So my
Mm.
motivation and my attachment to that has now I've let that go. My mission on the other, now that I've let that go, because that's part of the mission, figuring out
Right.
more and more how to let that go.
Okay.
Because if the more and more you hold on to that, that's just more density that you're just going to carry on. It's going to slow you down from the other missions that you could be a part of. And the other missions that I'm saying that you could be a part of, me example on my personal level, is to like see where, okay, well, what do people want to do? Like, well, I'm seeing that people want to, who are thinking outside of this codependency disease, on the slave masters, is really developing our own resources, our own land and um, our own connections to each other, and allowing allowing ourselves to transition out away from these programs and these systems that are really living off, like parasiting off of us, instead of helping us. They're under the guise of helping us, but they're parasiting off of us. So we have to start to develop our own systems of providing for ourselves. And where I'm seeing that needs to go, where I focus my energy on, is seeing how we could make it start out simply. Like I said, food, water, shelter, and don't make it even more complex. Don't do anything more than that. That's where my mission is kind of standing, and I'd rather work with people who are on that kind of mindset. Now, beyond that, not attaching or going into the my personal perspectives on how that's going to work, I know how this system is, as far as how it attacks, how it needs to work. And when we start working on our own like that, that's going to be a threat. Like I said, this is just going to be a mirror
Mm.
image of the Occupy movement. Once you become a threat, like once you start providing for yourself, making your own libraries, your own housing development, your own kitchens, your own daycares, and all that other stuff, that's
Right.
going to be a threat to that system, and you will be attacked. I mean, look at Black Wall Street, same thing. Their mindset is no different. So this parasite that is this government colonial mindset is living off of our life force energy. So when people start talking politics around me on a regular basis, I always go straight to like my baseline. I said, I'm about burning this whole shit down. Like I don't even want to talk about your politics. Like, why are you who first of all, why do you get to control where the conversation starts and where it ends? Like, who made you in charge of how we talk about it? Like, my perspective is very valid. We need to burn you. This system has proven over and over and over again that it is not for the people. Why are you
Right.
consuming my time? Why are you like who?
Right.
Why are you destroying this moment right now? I won't let you do that. Let's change the fucking subject if that's the case. So in real life, that's how I approach what's going on. And usually, they just change the subject. It doesn't go that far. As soon as I say
Right.
I'm about burning this shit down, they either talk to somebody else or they move on and just let it be. But
Hmm.
that's also how I'm kind of feeling out where people are and how they're going to respond. And like I said, that's just more and more confirmation that it's going to take a little bit of time for people on a massive scale to be doing this. But in order to help that process move forward, we have to be examples of this being able to work. So
Mm.
how I see that is to do that on a personal level, first of all. And that's what was part of my silence, is to say, look, like, I put my weapon down for an entire year. I was helped out, with my family and friends during that year. We can, and there's a lot of the things that changed, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done on a massive scale that we could do, but like I said, that personal work needs to be done first. And
Mm.
if we start doing that even more so, a step to doing that is letting go of all these big ass groups that are out there too. So like
Mm.
all this extra language and like conscious community, woke this, alien
Mm.
that, like, and begging for uh, saviors and needing all these teachers. We don't need all these teachers. We don't need all these perspectives. A lot of this old shit, like, it's old. Like, be like, you're a teacher right now. You're alive right now. If that's what you really need, like, challenge yourself to go into teaching what you're supposed to be teaching right now. Teach yourself, first of all, what you
Mm.
are looking for in another teacher. Because if you still keep externalizing the work that needs to be done, you're only going to be able to move as fast as what those people that you put up on those pedestals, what they have done. And a
Wow.
lot of these teachers
That's
are
powerful.
not going to do that work because they have a demographic that they're speaking to. So they're
Mm.
going to continue to add energy to their limitations in order to build up that demographic.
Wow.
Because if they go any further than that demographic, they're going to lose followers.
Mm.
So this is what happens with these groups and teachers that are out there. They can't really go as far as they could because it'll just be too much. And
Wow.
that's what you're seeing on YouTube right now, and a lot of these so-called communities. A lot of they have to hold on to an idea because, like I said before, we're in like a dark room, and
Right.
there's all this stuff there, and the smallest amount of light that's in there, you're gonna want to hold on to what's around there.
Right.
So that's what people are doing right now. And then when you say something about that, like, "Hey, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Like, this is
Exactly.
this is how it's supposed to be." I'm like, "Wait a second, man. I'm on the same page. I'm all for turning on these lights. Like, I'm not saying turn off your light. I'm just saying turn on more light so you can see
Right.
more about what's going on here."
Right.
Once
Wow.
people
That's
get in
powerful.
that little light bubble and like, "Oh, hey, don't fuck with my bubble," and like, don't, like, "All right, man, I'm done with that shit. Oh, and then like I said before, they have to label you and put you in a category. Like, all right, man.
Right. Right.
But that's
Wow.
that's yeah, as far as that's my perspective on missions and all that other stuff. And start small, keep it small. Like, start feeding people on a small scale. Start, making housing environments, and that's another distraction that I'm seeing on social media. And I think it's I'm confirming even more so that it's part of like these agents out there who are talking about like putting them like we need to do this on a huge scale. I'm like, no, I don't think that's the right way. Like that's really just putting yourself out there to be attacked by the huge scale, you know, pushers out there.
Mm,
If we stay, we're connected. We can't help but be connected. We can't help but we already unified. We're
mm,
unified in the sense that we've been fucked over for so long. Like this is we don't need extra unification things to like. There's things that are out there that already. So if we're like is like in Oakland, for example, we can start, setting up little like Oakland, West Oakland in particular used to be a heavy industrial area. So these empty ass buildings out here, we can have people who are thinking on a certain level instead of, developers turning into condos for these gentrifiers to move in, get it and turn it into a big ass grocery store that, hands out boxes of food to
mm,
people, like anything on any kind of scale like that, just to start the process. Because if we don't start on a small scale like that, then we'll spend the rest of our time, talking ourselves out of making any kind of movement. And that's what
mm,
I've known. That's what I've noticed is that people get so overwhelmed with the idea of big missions and all this other stuff. What we should be doing is like, oh well, and it's easier to see it once you've done that personal work. Once you've kind of gone through the letting go of all the big shit that's out there, then you kind of
mm,
come back and you lighten up and you'll see that there's only so much that needs to be done on that will actually send a shockwave into those bigger waves later on down the line. But right now, stop the bleeding.
mm.
That's what I really want to focus on. That's my mission. Stop the
Stop the
bleeding.
bleeding.
Stop
Stop the
the
bleeding.
fucking bleeding.
Stop the bleeding, man. Wow, that's powerful, man. I feel you. So let me ask you this, and just in your personal opinion, with you having the year of silence and with things changing, how a lot of events are taking place since the beginning of 2020. So, do you, in your personal opinion, do you feel that there is a shift or there is something changing about the collective mind and the collective hive, I would say, if you look at it like that?
I mean, there's always been shifting. There's just like certain time frames of shift that are a little more obvious than others. I just think this is just one of those. Uh,
Oh, okay.
and like I said, like on the shift towards what is what I'm saying. Like, yeah, it's shifting, but shifting towards what? That's the main focus. Is what's def excuse me, what's definitely shifting is the shifting of the the bleeding corporation, the bloodletting corporation. That's shifting. That's definitely shifting. So
Okay.
as we see, because in like conscious communities or people who are thinking outside of the mainstream boxes, we tend to look at only how we see what's going on, and we don't really look at how the shifting of the the bloodsuckers is also shifting too. Not in like, oh, the new age, oh, you're negatively thinking, you're thinking low energy. No, no, fuck this. This is a war going on,
Right.
and
Right.
you have people who are shifting, who are thinking on a positive scale, like, let's, how I see it, we need to provide for ourselves, but you also can't be ignorant of the the war that's being waged against you on a personal and on a macro scale.
Mm,
So the shifting that I was saying, that's shifting all the time, is the shifting of the people towards a positive light, sort of recognizing that there's a war going on every level, the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual. That's always been shifting. Yes, it's shifting a little bit more, but what I'm more focused on is how the shifting of the systems of dominance and control and ignorance and addiction and disease, that's shifting even more so. So um, they're shifting gears into, and this is also shifting with the evolution of technology. So that's
Mm,
what I really want to focus on even more so, is because that's part of stopping the bleeding. As more as people
right.
go into the deeper people go into technology and giving their power away to, like what's going on with the the virus stuff that's going on right now, and
Mm-hmm.
the lies. That's another part of bleeding, right? People believing these lies about the numbers that are the scare tactics and all this other stuff that's out there. That's all a part of control. That's all a part of manipulating the mindset to be even more so in this codependency. Because on a non-physical, the non-physical blood that's going on right now is part of, that's being sucked, is amplified by the fear. So the fear and the codependency that's out there, and yeah, that's shifting even more so. So
Mm,
that's really where what I'm seeing um, is the obvious shift on like a conscious, awakening level. I don't really
mm-hmm.
go into those realms of, how that's shifting and all, because I don't
Okay.
see, I don't, it's always happening, first of all. And, you have to pick a certain sort of like what it's going towards. I don't have that. I don't think
Mm,
we're shifting to some mass awakening that's going to activate the chakras of the universe and all that. Like, I don't go into all that
right.
stuff. Like, that's,
Right.
I mean, if something's going to happen like that on that level, we wouldn't be able to comprehend what the fuck is going on anyway. So we
Right.
would just be a part of that shift, and it would just happen if
Mm,
something like that was going to happen. So for people claiming and
right.
saying like, oh yeah, this is opening the third eye and all that other stuff, it's just commercializing something that can't even be comprehended. So
Mm,
why, it's just like I said before, these are holy business salesmen, holy business
right.
superheroes. You have to
Mm,
conceptualize something that can't be put in a box, and if you, the only people who put that stuff in a box is people trying to make money off of what they just prepackaged.
mm.
So
Wow, that's deep. Well, let me ask you this, because you know we talk about this spiritual warfare that's going on, but just observing our physical reality and just learning some of the history that we were taught and that we even researched on our own, we know that based on previous wars, that wars don't last forever, right? They don't last forever. So if this is a spiritual war, how long do you think we'll be playing this cycle out, or how long, in your personal opinion, do you think that the war will end, or will it change, or you know what I'm saying? Like, you feel what I'm talking about? It's like, if it's a war, is it an ongoing war? Is this an eternal war that we're battling? You know what I'm saying? Like, what would be the purpose of this?
well, and then you can go into what would be the purpose of this entire experience. Who's
Exactly.
to, who's to say like, because our lives are only for so long. Like, why does this experience have to be based upon the human experience? Like, what, like our perspective? Why does it have to be based upon like wars and
Oh, that's deep.
yeah, maybe this place is only for people to experience a spiritual war. Who's to say that that? And then once they die, they either go into another place where they have to experience more spiritual warfare to be more of themselves, or they go somewhere else where they don't need spiritual war. But right now, I'm under this impression that
Hmm.
spiritual warfare and warfare in general is for whatever reason, a part of this experience. Beyond that, I mean, and you can conceptualize forever. I don't know. Like I said, I focus more of my attention on stopping the bleeding of the what's happening as a result of these wars, spiritual, psychological, and
Right.
physical. And like I said, like you can
Okay.
go on to waxing rhapsodic for forever about why things are the way they are, and um, people make a lot of money off of that, and they do a lot of talks about that. But at the end of the day,
Right.
how many people bled out, while they were talking about, what could be and how that could be. Yeah, so I don't know,
Yeah.
basically, and I'm comfortable with that because I'm gonna only be, in this place for so long, just like anybody else is only gonna be here for so long. And then in the end of the day, is it really gonna matter? Like how I
Mm.
knew, like what I knew about what's going on here, does that really matter? No, I don't think so.
Mm.
Uh,
Wow. That's
because
powerful.
when you really boil it down, like even the question of that, even going into that question, takes you out of the matter of that moment. So it actually
Right.
does more
Yeah, I
harm
see
than
what you're
any
saying.
good.
Mhm.
Like, so you can use it
Yeah,
as a
because
stepping
it
stone.
takes you on your, yeah, your imagination starts to, starts to run wild. You start to think of a lot of things instead of just actually being present in the moment, like you said.
Yeah, and
Wow.
then you think
Yes,
yourself out of
that's deep.
action. And this physical
Mhm.
reality is about action in motion, physical action in motion. So
Exactly.
if you just sit there thinking about, like I said, you can fly into the spiritual infinity forever, and for what?
Right.
Like it's just intellectual or spiritual masturbation, basically. Like,
Right.
oh, feels good, but when you finish that thought, what now? You're back to
Wow.
the physical. You're never going to leave that
Exactly. You're back to
physical.
the physical.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's why I said
That's
there's no
powerful.
separation between the physical and the spiritual.
Yeah.
Like we make these separations to separate us from each other, and
Hmm.
have this identity, and then take that even a step even further. You have kings and queens who are saying, like, I'm not only separate from you, but I'm better than you, and I need to own billions of acres of land, and you can go fuck yourself. So,
Mm. Mm. Wow. Yeah, man, that's deep, man. You saying some deep, profound stuff, man, and I appreciate that, bro. So stop the bleeding is what the mission is for Subtle right now. That self soul work, you know what I'm saying? And then just being the example, you know what I'm saying? Being the example in your personal life, and then being the example to your loved ones and the people around you. And hopefully, throughout time, that that would catch a wave and everyone else would start getting on board. So
and not
I can
having any
definitely,
attachments
yeah,
to that wave too. I had to add that too. Like, I don't even see, like, like, just leaving it there, just being an example for the sake of being an example of yourself. If
mm,
other people, see, you know, the changes, the letting go of a lot of densities and attachments and all that other stuff, that's fine and dandy. And if it goes on a grander scale, that's cool and all. But at the same time, that's also another attachment. If it's, what I'm saying, like having it,
right,
hoping that it happens on that, that's just another
mm,
expectation I don't really subscribe to. Um, yeah,
okay, that makes sense. So just do the work with yourself.
yeah.
That's the main thing. That's the
Things will
main thing.
make sense later. Things will make more sense as, the bleeding stops and the body gets into its own stasis, its own, like, right now it's like a motor that's just leaking oil every day, and then, each little motors, little parts of the motor are just blowing up here and there every day, but it's still going on. But it's never we're never really running at full capacity as long as we keep bleeding out.
Mm.
I'm not saying there's any gold pots at the end of the rainbow when we stop bleeding out. I'm just saying stop the
Right.
bleeding,
Stop the bleeding first.
stop the bleeding first, and then, leave it there. If something happens
Right.
after that, then great. But just right now, it could take lifetimes. It could take generations. It take generations of people to stop the bleeding.
Right. Right.
And
That's powerful, man. That's powerful and that's deep, man. you know, and I think a lot of people will have something to think about, man. You know what I'm saying? Would definitely have something to think about. So I really appreciate this information, bro. I really appreciate your time. You know, you definitely spit some hard, deep knowledge today, man. And I appreciate that personally. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna have to study this and actually, you know, sit with it and vibe to it, man, because like I told you earlier, this is why I do these soul views, man. I want to connect with like-minded people and also to see their personal journeys, to understand their minds so I can pick out the necessary ingredients I need for myself that can help me with my personal soul work and my personal stopping the bleeding. Because like you said, we're all going through that. And I think that's a powerful statement in itself. You know, if you really just sit down and digest that statement, is stop the bleeding. That's like somebody getting shot in a war and they're worried about the other people and they're trying to move around and do everything besides stopping the bleeding, stopping the wound. You know what I'm
Trying to
saying? That's
polish the fingernails and,
exactly
cut
like
their
they doing
hair and stuff.
everything.
Like,
Yeah,
they're
they doing
bleeding out right
everything
now.
else. They doing everything else except for damn, you got
Yeah,
shot, man. Stop the bleeding first. You know what I'm saying? How can you
yeah,
operate? You know what I'm saying? So I think that personally, I think that's super deep. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's not really deep. It's just really simple. And I
yeah,
think that it's
exactly.
powerful though. You know what I'm saying? Like I just had to get that right. I'm just saying it's deep because you really don't hear a lot of people speaking about that, man. You know what I'm saying? Or saying that type of information. So that's why we claim it's so-called deep, but it's not really deep and it's really simple, bro.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So I really appreciate that, man. And I appreciate this information, man. So, you know, before I let you go, bro, let everyone know if you know, to go to your page, I'm gonna have all your links in the descriptions, but let them know where they can find you at, man. You know, Instagram, YouTube, social media, anything that you want to promote, bro.
All right. Thank you. And yeah, thank you again for, allowing me on this platform and then, putting this information out there like that. 'Cause like I said, there's not a lot of places that people will do that. Um, but yeah, thank you.
Man, my pleasure, bro. I appreciate it.
So yeah, I don't have a Facebook anymore. I have Instagram that I just use to kind of, put little things here and there. I think it's subtle underscore infinity. If you want to share content from there, um, that'd be appreciated. My YouTube channel is just subtle infinity. I haven't been putting much information or as many videos as I used to, but if you're interested, then there's excuse me, over 1,000 videos that I've uploaded over the last 6, 7 years now on that channel. And I'll go into, I'm pretty sure I'll keep making videos here and there, but I want to focus more. It's taking me a little while to process a lot of the information that I've kind of downloaded over my year of silence. If you want any
Right.
information on that, I did a couple of videos breaking that down and, the reasons why. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have as far as just YouTube and Instagram and um, anything other than that. None of the videos on there, none of that is monetized. If anybody wanted to, donate or anything, then I think I have a PayPal on there, and on my website, I do have a website that's pretty old. I haven't really updated it. That just shows kind of like my that's just subtleinfinity.com. That just shows a lot of the work that I did. I used to do a lot of embroidery work,
Oh,
just
dope.
embroidering different kinds of sacred symbols, making water chargers. I don't make any water chargers anymore, but the images are still there. And I used to make some organite and don't do that anymore, but the images is there that people check that out and video links and stuff like that. And but that's basically it. Website, YouTube, and Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, I appreciate that, man. Hey, and I fuck with you, bro. You already know, man. And I'm proud to see, you know, the transformation that you're going through, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's dope, man. And I understand, you know, where you're at right now as far as your clarity on things, man. How you see things from a different perspective, and you're starting to, you know, basically understand why you went through the processes that you went through and where you're at today. like you and like myself, we're all trying to figure this out, bro. You know what I'm saying? There's no wrong way to do this. If we don't have the answers, there's really no wrong way to do this, man. So, you know, salute to you on the way that you're doing it, man. I hope it all works out for you, bro. And whatever you decide to do, you know what I'm saying? If it's getting off YouTube and doing something else, you know, I definitely support you for sure, bro. For sure.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'll just
It's all
be doing like interviews like this and hopefully other extensions of that. That's pretty much all I have been open to. Just kind of like communicating with like minds and seeing where the stuff like I get a lot. Like I hear myself even when I speak a lot, like things I didn't even realize breaking when I speak to, people who are still kind of like in that space of, what's going on here? We're all
right.
there in
Yeah.
our own way.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. And I think that that's a good idea for you to do if you decide not to, you know, kind of like upload videos so much, but just do more interviews, because I believe that in the state of mind of where you're at right now, man, it's powerful for people to kind of hear that information. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And I think that, you know, if my channel was much bigger, it'd be great. But, you know, I think that you might want to connect with some people that are actually have a bigger channel as well, because, man, for me, how I see things, bro, is that we all have purposes, man. And I don't think that you fell into the lane that you fell into, and just by hearing your story by accident. It's all been designed, bro, and it's all been written out for you. You know what I'm saying? So you do have something to contribute to the collective consciousness, man. You know what I'm saying? And I think that your voice is powerful, bro. And, you know, I understand that you're going through a personal transformation, but you can't, for me, I feel like you can't lose sight of what your ability is here. You definitely have an ability to communicate with people, and people relate and resonate with what you do. So therefore, that is a clear sign that something is right. You know what I'm saying? Like you're doing something right.
Yeah.
So I understand your personal transformation. I just don't want you to lose that understanding of how powerful your voice is. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. Now,
I
wherever you
appreciate
take it
that.
with that, you know, you could take it with that, because I understand I've been through personal transformations myself, man. You know what I'm saying? And that's why it kind of got me on YouTube, you know, to try to meet people like myself, but then to understand that, damn, okay, like, what is this all about? And like, what can I personally do? You know what I'm saying? And what's helpful for me? And I try, because I don't have any friends, bro. And it's not like because people don't want to be my friends. It's personal decisions. I had to do what you did for a year of silence, man. I had to sit with myself for 5 years, bro, by myself, man. Have no friends, no nothing. I got my wife and my kids, you know what I'm saying? But I really had to do the internal work, man. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling you, I understand where you're at, and I understand that transformation. And I'm telling you, it's powerful. But once you come out of that transformation, bro, that's what I'm saying. It sparked that light you were talking about. It put more gas on that light for me. And I had to figure out a way how I can do something, how to, like Krishnamurti said, how to integrate within a sick society like the goddamn internet. You know what I'm saying? I had to find a way where I can integrate within the internet to try to do something, not just as self-therapy for myself, but also to talk to people who is on the same frequency, man. Because I know, based on what you said, that that we all are connected no matter what, right? So I'm like, if I'm having this understanding and this urge to speak on certain things, and to want to talk about certain things that are not just like mainstream shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know it has to be other people like that. And then also, what are we creating when we're doing that? So when we're doing this build, what kind of energy are we creating? You know what I'm saying? So I
Mm-hmm.
had to think about that, but that was just a way for me to do something outside of my comfort zone. Because during my transformational time, you know, when I had to sit in solitude, you know, I didn't speak to anybody. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't going anywhere. I was just basically with myself. You know what I'm saying? And now I had to come out of that shell because it was a part of me growing. You know what I'm saying? Me communicating with people. Again, I didn't do that, man. So this is all new for me, and it's all a way for me to express my growth and express, you know what I'm saying, getting back to reality, you know, understanding that this reality is here for a reason, man. I promise you, bro. That's just my personal opinion. You know what I'm saying? I really believe that we are here for a reason. This shit just ain't here just to be a shit, because if we was all in the like the infinity of the world and the spiritual shit, man, there wouldn't be a need for a physical realm, man. And that's where I've came to that conclusion in this journey. Is like, man, it's kind of like the example that you said. You know, it's like when you're daydreaming and shit, you're missing what's in front of you. It's like the kind of example I would say is if you go into a movie theater, you're watching the movie, and during the time when the movie starts, you start daydreaming. You're missing the whole fucking movie. And I think that sometimes with what you're saying with a lot of this so-called consciousness community, and I hate even that term, but you know, this conscious community, man, it seems like some people are hustling this shit and trying to put a spin on it where they're not truly giving you the real transformational information, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's everybody, but you do have a lot of spiritual hustlers, conscious hustlers, you know what I'm saying, in this game. But that's in every lane, man. And that's what I've experienced through life. There's con artists and there's hustlers in every single part of life, dog. You know what I'm saying? And you just have to decipher that and understand it. But you know, it's just a process, man. We're all going through this process, man. You know what I'm saying? I don't think one person has all the answers because we all don't know it. I think there are a group of people, you know, like you said, the elite, the system that's running this shit, that do have some of those answers and they don't let it out to the public. But I do feel that the system itself, the people who is running the system, the shit, they're falling. I feel like they're falling. You know what I'm saying? I feel like they're breaking the fuck down, bro. You know what I'm saying? Real talk. And hopefully that's a good thing, because based on what you're talking about, stopping the bleeding, if we can get our personal selves correct, you know what I'm saying, while they're falling and this cycle is going through, hopefully we can get some type of balance out of it, man.
Definitely, yeah. Even even like I said, if you the more bleeding that you stop, the more their systems are gonna fall. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. It happens instantaneously. And what I'm saying is that we need to focus more of our energy on stopping the bleeding, because that is focusing on the energy on yourself and the other system at the
Exactly.
same time, instead of, because if we just focus on the blood letters, like the people who are making the bleeding, then we're not healthy ourselves in order healthy enough in ourselves to focus on ourselves and strengthen ourselves. Because once we
Facts.
strengthen ourselves, then we'll be able to do even more, stop the blood sucking systems and the
Exactly.
parasitic systems.
Exactly. Like you said, after you stop the bleeding, man, you'll be able to clearly see. You'll be able to, you know what I'm saying? Like after you
Yeah.
have a wound and you heal yourself, you'll be able to see, and then you can go from there, you know,
Yep.
but then don't have any expectations and attachments from that, or expectations for that, because
Yep.
then if you have an expectation for it, you can always be let down. You
Yep.
understand? So
Or guided
exactly.
into another,
There you go.
parasitic trap.
Exactly. So that's why I said what you're saying is so powerful, man. You know what I'm saying? And it's so simple, and that everybody can do it. So I appreciate that. Let's stop the bleeding, man. So Subtle Infinity, man, I appreciate you, man. Have a good day, bro, and enjoy your journey and continue to grow, man. You know,
All right. You too. Thank you. I appreciate it.
anytime, bro. This has been another episode of Soul View, y'all. Hope you enjoy it. Peace.